I've lived in this house for almost 10 years now, long enough for every creak in the floorboards and rattle of the old pipes to become familiar. It's not a particularly old house, 1950s, maybe, but it has that kind of settled quiet at night, the kind that makes you feel like you're underwater. I'm not easily spooked, and nothing about this place has ever struck me as unusual. Until yesterday. I went down to the basement to grab a box of winter clothes I'd stored months ago. The stairs groaned the way they always do, the light above me flickering for a second before humming to life. The air down there is always cooler, with that faint, musty smell of concrete and dust. But as soon as I stepped off the bottom stair, something felt off. It's hard to explain. The basement isn't big, one rectangular room, a workbench, shelves lined with paint cans and tools, and my old washer and dryer tucked against the far wall. I know every inch of it. Yet that day, the back corner looked different, like the shadows were heavier. I walked closer, blinking, thinking maybe I was imagining it. But no, against the far wall, where I knew for a fact there had only ever been cinder block, there was now a door. A door. It wasn't old like the rest of the basement. It looked new. The wood was pale, unpainted, and the metal handle gleamed under the flickering light. The frame fit perfectly into the wall, as if it had been there all along. I froze, staring at it, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe I'd somehow never noticed it before. Maybe it was a panel or an access door I'd forgotten about. I reached out and touched the handle. Cold. Solid. Not just a panel, an actual door. I gave it a tentative pull. Locked. My heart thumped harder than I wanted to admit. This wasn't possible. I'd been in this basement hundreds of times. There had never been a door here. I backed up a step, scanning the wall. There was no sign of construction, no dust, no saw marks, nothing. The concrete floor ran seamlessly up to the frame, as if the house had grown it overnight. I stayed down there longer than I should have, just staring at it. My mind cycled through rational possibilities, a hidden room from the original construction, some kind of prank, maybe even a trick of my memory. But none of it added up. Finally, I went back upstairs, trying to shake the unease. I told myself I'd deal with it later. That night, though, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image of that door in my head, the way it didn't belong, the way it seemed to almost hum in the silence of the basement. Around midnight, I got up, poured myself a glass of water, and went to stand at the top of the basement stairs. The air coming up from below felt cooler than usual, like someone had opened a window down there. The faint hum of the furnace was gone. I don't know what made me do it, but I crept down the steps, barefoot, the wood cold under my feet. The light above flickered twice before coming on. The door was still there, but something else was different now. I stopped halfway across the room, my heart suddenly hammering. From the other side of the door, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze. The sound echoed slightly in the basement, but it was definitely coming from inside the door. Someone, or something, was on the other side. I stared at the handle, my pulse roaring in my ears. The knocking stopped, replaced by silence so deep it made my stomach twist. I backed away slowly, but my eyes stayed locked on that door, waiting for the sound again. And then, just as I reached the stairs, a voice, soft, hoarse, and impossibly close, whispered my name from the other side. I nearly lost my balance on the stairs when I heard it. My name, clear as day, spoken in a voice I didn't recognize. Low, strained, but somehow knowing. I stood frozen, gripping the banister, straining my ears. For a long moment, there was nothing, no more knocking, no whispering, not even the hum of the furnace. Just silence. My throat was dry. I wanted to tell myself I'd imagined it, that maybe the creak of the wood or the settling of the pipes had twisted into something my mind interpreted as speech. But deep down, I knew what I'd heard. It wasn't the kind of sound you mistake. I backed up the stairs one step at a time, eyes glued to the door until I reached the top. I slammed the basement door shut and twisted the lock, like that flimsy piece of metal would make a difference. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound in the house seemed magnified. The wind pressing against the windows, the faint ticking of the clock in the living room, even my own breathing. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. How does something that wasn't there yesterday suddenly appear? And worse, how does it know my name? When morning finally came, I almost convinced myself to go about my day like nothing had happened. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe my brain had played tricks on me in the dark. But part of me knew I wouldn't be able to function until I went back down there. I had to look again. I waited until the sun was high, its light filling the kitchen, before I forced myself to open the basement door. The first thing that hit me was the cold. It felt like stepping into a cellar in the dead of winter. I descended slowly, my bare feet gripping the wood. The bulb overhead buzzed, flickered, then steadied, casting its pale glow across the basement. The door was still there. Same pale wood, same shiny handle. Except now, something was different. There were scratches. Long, deep grooves carved into the wood around the bottom of the frame, like something had clawed from the inside, trying to get out. My stomach dropped. I hadn't noticed them last night. They hadn't been there. I was sure of it. I crouched down, running my fingers just above the grooves. They were jagged, uneven, desperate. My skin crawled. Then, from the other side, there was a sound. Not knocking this time. Scraping. A slow, deliberate dragging sound, as if something was moving along the wall just beyond the door. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a box behind me. My hands were shaking, my pulse in my throat. That's when I saw it. The handle. It moved. Just slightly, enough to catch the light as it rattled against the lock. Something on the other side was trying the door. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the kitchen door again, locking it even though I knew how pointless it was. I pressed my back against it, listening, my chest heaving. For a few minutes, nothing. Then, softly, faintly, the sound of nails dragging along wood. A scrape, then another. And then silence. I didn't go back down the rest of the day. I couldn't. I distracted myself with chores, with TV playing too loudly, with anything that kept my mind off that basement door. But every so often, I swore I could feel a vibration under my feet, like something moving below me. That night, I decided to sleep on the couch in the living room, as far from the basement as I could. I left the lamp on, the glow a weak comfort. But around 2 in the morning, I woke up suddenly, my heart racing, though I didn't know why. Then I heard it. From below, faint but unmistakable, the sound of the basement door opening. I sat up, my eyes wide in the dim light. The lock. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. The air in the room shifted, colder, heavier, like something unseen had seeped into the house. And from the darkened hallway that led to the basement, I heard it again, my name. Whispered, closer this time. I didn't move. I sat there on the couch, rigid, my eyes fixed on the shadowy hallway that led to the basement door. The whisper had been so close, too close. I could almost feel the breath of it against my ear. The house was utterly still. No creaks, no hum of the refrigerator, not even the faint tick of the wall clock. Just that suffocating silence, as though the entire world was holding its breath with me. I told myself not to move, not to make a sound. If I stayed quiet, maybe whatever was in my house wouldn't notice me. But then, creak. The floorboard at the edge of the hallway groaned, the same way it always did when I stepped there. Except I hadn't moved. My skin went cold. Someone, was standing just out of sight. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe quietly. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body felt anchored, frozen in place. Slowly, I turned my head toward the side table. My phone was sitting there, only a few feet away. If I could grab it, call someone, anyone, it might break this nightmare. I shifted an inch, then another, keeping my eyes on the hallway. The shadows seemed to waver, as if they were thicker, alive. Finally, I snatched the phone. My fingers trembled as I swiped at the screen, trying to unlock it, when, bang, the sound exploded through the house, the unmistakable slam of the basement door. The vibration traveled through the floor, rattling the lamp on the table. I nearly dropped the phone. The silence that followed was worse. Heavier. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I unlocked the phone, pulled up the keypad. My thumb hovered over 911. But then a thought stopped me. What exactly would I say? There's a door in my basement that wasn't there yesterday, and something behind it knows my name. They'd either send someone to cart me off, or worse, they'd come, search the basement, and find nothing. And then I'd be left alone with whatever this was. I put the phone down, my hands shaking so violently I had to clench them to stop. For the rest of the night, I sat there, the lamp glowing weakly against the dark. Nothing else happened, but I didn't close my eyes once. By morning, the air felt lighter again. The house hummed with its usual life. The fridge buzzing, the pipes groaning, the occasional creak of the wood as it settled. Almost like nothing had happened. Almost. I forced myself into a routine. Coffee, toast, standing by the window to watch the world outside my house move on, as if I weren't living in a waking nightmare. But the basement door loomed in the back of my mind. I knew I had to check. I couldn't avoid it forever. By late afternoon, I finally worked up the nerve. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and headed for the basement. The air hit me as soon as I opened the door, cold, damp, heavier than before. I descended slowly, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. The bulb overhead flickered once, twice, then went dark. I froze. My thumb clicked the flashlight on, its narrow beams slicing through the gloom. The basement looked the same: boxes, tools, washer and dryer. But when the light swept across the far wall, my stomach twisted. The door was wide open. I gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam shaking as it illuminated the dark space beyond the frame. It wasn't a room, not in the normal sense. Instead, a narrow corridor stretched back into the wall, made of the same cinder block as the rest of the basement, but darker, damp, the mortar glistening as though it had just been laid. The passage was too narrow, barely wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. And it seemed to keep going, deeper and deeper, swallowed by shadows. A cold draft poured out from the opening, carrying with it a smell that made my stomach churn, earthy, metallic, like rust and damp soil. I leaned closer, my pulse thudding in my ears. The air inside the corridor felt charged, buzzing faintly against my skin. And then, deep in the darkness, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing faintly against the stone. Her words hung in the air long after the call ended. Something that does not belong in this world. I sat there at the kitchen table, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. The sun streamed through the window, warm against my skin, but it didn't matter. I felt cold, deep down, like the chill had seeped from the basement and lodged itself inside me. Evelyn had refused to say more. The moment I pressed her, she grew agitated, her voice cracking with urgency. Don't go near it. Don't answer it. And if it calls your name, do not listen. Then she hung up. Her warning echoed in my head. Don't listen. But it was already too late, wasn't it? I had heard the voice. It had whispered my name, clear as anything. And worse, I had answered. For the rest of the day, I avoided the basement entirely. I kept myself busy upstairs, doing chores I didn't need to do, blasting music, anything to drown out the thought of what might be waiting beneath me. But the house had changed. It felt like it was watching me. Every time I walked past the basement door, I swore I felt a shift in the air, like the faintest exhale of cold breath escaping the cracks. By nightfall, I was too wired to even pretend to sleep. I sat on the couch, all the lights in the house blazing, my body tight with nervous energy. My ears strained for the smallest sound, waiting for the inevitable. And then, right around midnight, it started. First, the knocking. Slow, rhythmic, 3 times, each one echoing up through the floor like a pulse. I gritted my teeth, clenching my fists. I wasn't going to answer. I wasn't even going to move. Then the voice came. Please. It was weaker now, fragile, like someone barely hanging on. It's so dark in here. I can't breathe. I pressed my palms over my ears, my whole body trembling. Don't listen. Don't listen. Evelyn's warning rang in my skull. But then the voice said something that made my blood run cold. It used my mother's voice. I hadn't heard it in years, not since she passed. But there it was, soft, warm, achingly familiar. Sweetheart, please, help me. My hands dropped from my ears before I realized it. Tears stung my eyes, unbidden, as I sat there frozen. Rationally, I knew it wasn't her. It couldn't be. But the sound burrowed into me, cutting deeper than fear ever could. The knocking came again, sharper this time. Let me out, the voice pleaded. It's me. Don't you recognize me? I stumbled to my feet without thinking, drawn down the hallway toward the basement door. My body moved before my mind could stop it. The voice was closer now, almost tender. I need you. I wrapped my hand around the knob. It was ice cold. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out everything else. And then, just as I was about to twist it, I heard something else. A whisper, but not from the basement. This one was inside my head, sharp and urgent. Don't. I jolted back, my hand slipping from the knob as though it had burned me. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. The knocking stopped. The voice fell silent. The house was still again. I stumbled back to the living room, heart racing, sweat soaking through my shirt. I didn't sleep a second that night. By morning, my decision was made. I couldn't live like this, not knowing, not waiting for whatever was behind that door to finally get out. I had to do something. I grabbed my laptop, sat at the kitchen table, and started searching. I didn't even know what I was looking for: urban legends, old records, anything that might explain the impossible. Hours passed as I dug through archives, scanned old property records, squinted at yellowed newspaper clippings. Most of it was useless. But then I found something. A headline from nearly 50 years ago: local boy missing, last seen near residence on Hollow Creek Road. My address. I leaned closer, scanning the details. 10 years old. Vanished without a trace. The case had never been solved. And beneath the article, in faded black and white, was a photo. The boy's face stared back at me, hollow-eyed, unsmiling. I dropped my coffee when I saw it. Because I knew that face. It was the same boy I'd seen in a dream weeks before, standing at the foot of my bed, silent, watching. I stared at the photograph until my eyes blurred, my mind refusing to connect the dots even as they lined up in front of me. The boy from the dream. The boy from the article. The boy from my house. I forced myself to keep reading, scanning every scrap of information I could find. The boy's name was Daniel Whitmore. He'd vanished in 1974, last seen playing near the woods at the back of this property. Witnesses said he was quiet, withdrawn, the kind of child who could vanish into a crowd. Police combed the woods, drained the creek, searched every inch of the property. Nothing. Until now. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms over my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this did. A boy gone for 50 years, a hidden corridor behind a door that didn't exist, a voice that could sound like my mother. How was any of this possible? My mind was a whirl of questions, but one thing cut through it. The door. Whatever was behind it had been here long before me. Maybe long before Evelyn, too. Maybe long before the house itself. The thought made my stomach twist. By late afternoon, the house had gone unnervingly quiet again. No knocking, no voices. But that was almost worse. It felt like the calm before a storm. I needed to know what was down there. The warnings, the fear, they weren't enough anymore. Curiosity and dread tangled inside me until they became the same thing. So I prepared. I found an old crowbar in the garage, heavy and rusted, but still solid. I took my flashlight and duct taped it to the crowbar so I'd have a free hand. Then I slipped my phone into my pocket, already recording, because part of me needed proof for myself, or maybe for someone else if I didn't make it back. As twilight bled into the kitchen, I descended the basement stairs. The bulb overhead flickered but stayed on, a weak cone of light over the concrete. The door was shut again. I gripped the crowbar, my palms slick. The pail would look the same as it had the first day I saw it, except for the scratches at the bottom. Deeper now, more frantic. I crouched, peering closer. Some of the scratches were fresh, tiny splinters curled up from the wood, the edges still raw. Something had been clawing at it recently. A shiver ran down my spine. I put my ear to the door, holding my breath. Nothing, just the faint smell of earth and something older, something sour. I straightened and took a step back. My hands were trembling as I fit the crowbar between the door and the frame. I hesitated, Evelyn's warning echoing in my head. Do not open it. No matter what you hear. But I'd already heard everything. I had to see. With a deep breath, I pried. The wood groaned, the lock protesting. I heaved harder. The crowbar slipped, then bit deep into the frame. With a crack, the lock gave way. The door swung inward an inch. A rush of cold air hit me, damp and metallic. The smell of soil and rust, and something sweet rotting at the edges. I gagged but pushed the door open further. The corridor yawned before me, narrow and dark. My taped flashlight beam slid over damp cinder block walls, glistening with moisture, the mortar darker than it should be. The passageway stretched on, swallowed by shadows. I stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged in front of me, curling into the beam of the light. The floor was rough under my shoes, packed dirt instead of concrete. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. Even my own footsteps seemed muffled, like the corridor was swallowing sound. And then I saw it, a small shape in the dirt ahead. I crouched, shining the light closer. It was a toy truck, rusted, wheels missing, caked in dried mud. Something about it felt wrong, like it had been waiting there for decades. I straightened slowly, my heart hammering. From the darkness ahead, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't my mother's voice this time. It was a child's. The voice was thin, almost fragile, yet it carried down the corridor with perfect clarity. My grip on the crowbar tightened until my hands ached. The flashlight beam shook as I swept it forward, catching only glimmers of damp walls and the endless narrowing passage. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. But the voice came again. Closer this time. "You shouldn't have come." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Daniel," I whispered before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was worse than any answer. The corridor seemed to hold its breath with me. Then, yes, a laugh. Quiet, breathy, and utterly wrong. "You remember me." I took a step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. I didn't remember him. I couldn't. Daniel had been gone decades before I even set foot in this house. Yet somehow, on some level, my body reacted like I did. The shadows shifted at the edge of the flashlight beam. Something moved. I raised the light higher. For a moment, I thought I saw the outline of a small figure standing just beyond reach of the glow. A child, barefoot, head tilted, my breath caught in my throat. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head further, unnaturally far, the neck bending like it had no bones at all. "I want out." My stomach knotted. I took another step back, my shoulder brushing the damp wall. The figure shifted again, closer now. My light trembled as I kept it trained on the dark. The shape didn't move like a child. It flickered, jerky, as though the space itself was spitting it forward in bursts. And then it was gone. The corridor ahead was empty. Just shadows. Just silence. I turned, panic rising, and that's when I saw it. Behind me, the same small figure, standing in the corridor I had already walked. My flashlight beam landed on its face. It wasn't a boy. Not really. The skin was pale, grayish, stretched too tight over bones that looked too sharp. The eyes were black hollows, empty but somehow watching. The mouth twisted into a smile too wide for its face. My knees buckled. I stumbled back, almost dropping the crowbar. The thing stepped closer, barefoot on the dirt floor. The smell hit me then. Rotting leaves, damp soil, something foul hidden deep underground. "Please," it rasped, the voice breaking, layered now, not just a child's but many, whispers tangled together. "Let us out." I raised the crowbar instinctively, though what good it would do I didn't know. My flashlight beam quivered over the thing's face, over the black hollows where eyes should have been. And then, impossibly, the voice changed again. "Son." My chest seized. It was my father's voice this time. Rough, familiar, achingly real. He'd been gone for years, buried across the state. "Don't leave me here," the thing begged, its voice cracking, splintering. "Please." The corridor pressed in around me, the air thick and heavy, my own breath shallow and ragged. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like they were encased in stone. The figure stepped closer. Its skin rippled, like something beneath it was shifting, writhing. Its hollow eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I felt a pull, like gravity itself was dragging me toward it. I tore my gaze away, stumbling backward, clawing for air. That's when the walls themselves groaned. The sound was deep, guttural, vibrating through the stone and dirt. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The corridor seemed to breathe, contracting, expanding. The figure smiled wider, impossibly wide, its mouth splitting at the corners until it was nothing but a gaping wound. I turned and ran. My shoes slipped on the damp dirt as I bolted back toward the basement door, the flashlight beam jerking wildly. Behind me, the voice rose, many voices, hundreds, overlapping in a horrible chorus. "Let us out." The sound chased me, pressed into my skull, shook through my bones. I burst through the basement door, slamming it shut behind me, shoving the chair under the knob again. My chest heaved, my vision swimming. From the other side, silence. And then, so soft I almost thought I imagined it, came a single knock. I didn't move from the door for hours. My back pressed against the wood, the crowbar still clenched in my hands. I sat there in the dim glow of the kitchen light, waiting. Every creak of the house made my stomach lurch. Every brush of air across my skin felt like the cold breath from that corridor. But nothing else came. Just that single knock, and then silence. By morning, My legs were stiff and my head throbbed from lack of sleep. I dragged myself to the couch and collapsed, crowbar never leaving my grip. The second my eyes shut, I dreamed. I was back in the corridor, flashlight beam trembling over damp stone. But this time, there were no walls. The passage opened into a vast cavern, stretching on forever, the air filled with whispers. I couldn't see the source, but I could feel them, hundreds of voices pressing against me from all directions. And in the middle of it all stood Daniel. He looked almost normal now. A boy, no older than 10, his hair matted, his clothes torn. His eyes were dark, but they weren't empty. They were sad. "You have to let us out," he said softly. "We don't belong here." When I tried to speak, my throat burned, my voice caught in my chest. All I could do was raise the crowbar, my hands trembling. Daniel didn't move. He just tilted his head, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're getting stronger." I jolted awake, sweat soaking through my shirt, the afternoon sun spilling weakly through the blinds. My crowbar lay across my lap. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I was awake at all. The dream had felt too real, like I'd actually been pulled back into that corridor. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I didn't eat. I barely moved. My mind spun around the same questions, over and over. Who were they? Why this house? Why me? When night fell again, I dreaded the silence. And sure enough, just past midnight, it came back. The knocking. 3 times, sharp and deliberate. I gritted my teeth, pressing my palms against my ears, rocking on the couch like a child. Don't listen, don't listen, don't listen. But the voices weren't content with the door anymore. They seeped through the floorboards, through the walls, whispering in every room of the house. My name, over and over, until it lost all meaning. At one point, I swore I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. But when I forced myself to look, the hallway was empty, only shadows stretching too long against the walls. By dawn, I was broken, exhausted, delirious, trembling from head to toe. I couldn't take another night of this. I needed help. So I called a priest. Not because I'm religious, I never really was, but because I didn't know who else to call. I found his number in a directory, some small parish 2 towns over. I told him there was something in my house. Something evil. He didn't laugh. He didn't even question it. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as he told me he'd come by that evening. When he arrived, I felt relief for the first time in days. He was older, mid-60s maybe, with kind eyes and hands that shook just slightly as he carried his worn leather bag. He didn't ask for a tour. He didn't ask questions. He just walked straight to the basement door, as if he already knew. The moment he touched the knob, his face changed. His mouth tightened, his eyes narrowing. He murmured something under his breath in Latin, I think. I stood behind him, gripping the crowbar, my stomach twisting. "What is it?" I asked. He turned to me, his expression grave. "This house sits on a wound," he said. "A tear in the world. That door isn't meant to be here. It's a passage." My throat went dry. To where? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a small silver cross from his bag and pressed it against the wood. The basement filled with a low, guttural growl. The walls trembled. The bulb overhead flickered violently before shattering, plunging us into darkness. And from the other side of the door came a voice, deep, booming, not childlike at all. "He's mine." The sound of that voice rattled through me, vibrating in my bones, shaking the air itself. It wasn't like the whispers or the cries before. It was ancient, commanding, furious. The priest staggered back, clutching the cross so tightly his knuckles whitened. His lips moved quickly, muttering prayers I couldn't catch over the roar that seemed to fill the entire basement. I pressed myself against the wall, my crowbar raised uselessly, the flashlight beam jerking in every direction. The door shook violently on its hinges, the wood groaning as though something enormous pressed against it from the other side. The priest shouted above the din, his voice firm but strained. "Do not listen to it. Whatever it says, do not answer." But it wasn't just talking anymore. The voice began to change, shifting, bending. First my mother's voice again. "Please, honey, I'm so scared. Open the door." Then my father's. "Son, it's me. Don't let him keep me in here." Then dozens more, all overlapping, all pleading, weeping, commanding. My name, over and over, until it blended into a horrible chorus. My legs buckled. My ears rang. It felt like the voices were inside my skull, clawing at my thoughts. The priest thrust his cross forward, chanting louder now, each word cracking through the noise like a whip. For a moment, the pressure in the room eased. The shaking slowed, but then the door bent inward. Just slightly, but enough to see the wood splinter. Something was coming through. I scrambled forward, dropping the flashlight as I grabbed the priest's arm. "We have to get out of here." His eyes were locked on the door, his face pale but resolute. "If we leave, it will not stay contained." The wood cracked again. A fissure split down the middle, just wide enough for a single, gray hand to reach through. Long fingers groped at the air, the nails black and jagged. I screamed before I could stop myself, stumbling back into the stairs. The priest roared something in Latin, louder, fiercer, and thrust the cross against the reaching hand. The scream that followed wasn't human. It shook the walls, rattled the shelves, knocked paint cans from their places to crash against the floor. The hand jerked back violently, retreating into the shadows. The fissure in the wood sealed shut as if it had never been there. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. The priest collapsed to his knees, sweat dripping down his face. His hands trembled as he clutched the cross to his chest. I stood there gasping, heart pounding so hard I thought it would stop, eyes glued to the now-still door. It looked exactly as it had before. Pale wood, metal handle, scratches near the bottom. Ordinary. Except it wasn't ordinary. Not anymore. The priest finally lifted his head. His eyes were haunted, his voice hoarse. "It's stronger than I thought. Much stronger." I swallowed, my throat raw. "What the hell is it?" He shook his head slowly. "Not a ghost. Not a demon, at least not in the way we understand them. It's older. It uses voices, faces, memories, anything to draw you in. It feeds on what you believe." I shivered. "And the boy? Daniel?" The priest closed his eyes for a moment, as if the name itself weighed heavy. "If he's in there, he's not what you saw. Whatever you encountered was only a shape, a lure." I sank onto the stairs, gripping the crowbar, trying to process his words. My mind buzzed with disbelief, but deep down, I knew he was right. The priest stood unsteadily, tucking the cross back into his bag. "I'll need to return. With help. With preparation. Do not go near it. Do not speak to it." He fixed me with a sharp gaze. "Promise me." I nodded numbly, though part of me knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. He left soon after, his old car rumbling down the street, leaving me alone in the silence of the house. I locked the basement door, wedged the chair beneath it, did everything I could to shut it out. But that night, as I lay awake on the couch, the whispers returned. Not from the basement this time, from inside my bedroom. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My body was heavy with exhaustion, my eyes barely open, but the whispers threaded through the air like smoke, soft, insistent, impossible to ignore. They weren't coming from below anymore. They were in my room. I sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from my shoulders. The moonlight spilling through the blinds cast pale lines across the walls, and in that light, the shadows seemed thicker, heavier, clinging to the corners like living things. Over here. The whisper was right by my ear. I flinched, swinging the crowbar I'd fallen asleep clutching. The metal whooshed through nothing but air. My breath came shallow, my chest tight. "Show yourself," I croaked, though the last thing I wanted was for it to listen. The whispers grew, overlapping, weaving into each other until they were almost words, almost sentences. My name slipped in among them, over and over, tugging at me, pulling me toward the darkest corner of the room. The closet. Its door was cracked open, just slightly, though I was sure I'd left it shut. I aimed the flashlight into the gap, the beam trembling. For a moment, I saw nothing but clothes and shadows. Then something shifted. A face. Small. Pale. The hollow-eyed boy again. His head peeked from between hanging shirts, his mouth stretched into that too-wide smile. "You let me out," he whispered. "Now I can stay." The air left my lungs. I stumbled back until my legs hit the bed, the flashlight beam jerking wildly. The boy didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared, his head slowly tilting in that unnatural angle. I raised the crowbar, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. "Get out," I shouted, though my voice cracked halfway. The boy only grinned wider. "But you invited me." The shadows in the closet rippled, spilling outward, spreading across the floor like black water. They crawled up the walls, swallowing the pale moonlight. My room grew colder, so cold my breath came in white clouds. I lunged for the door, yanking it open and stumbling into the hallway. But the whispers followed. The walls seemed to throb with them, every surface vibrating with the sound of voices I recognized and voices I didn't. I fled to the living room, flipping every light on as I went, but the brightness did nothing. The corners were still heavy with shadow, and in every flicker of the bulb, I swore I saw figures, faces half-formed, eyes glinting, mouths moving silently. My phone lay on the table. I snatched it up with trembling hands and dialed the priest's number. No answer. I called again, and again. Nothing. Straight to voicemail. Please, I begged into the phone, my voice cracking. You need to come back. It's not staying in the basement anymore. Please. I dropped the phone, my hands covering my face. My whole body shook as the whispers rose, filling the house like a chorus. They weren't confined anymore. They were everywhere. And then, abruptly, silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, that makes you realize how loud absence can be. I lowered my hands slowly, scanning the room. Nothing moved. The air was still. For a moment, I thought maybe it had stopped. Then I looked at the window. My reflection stared back at me, pale and haggard in the glass. Except it wasn't my reflection. Its lips were moving. Soundless words formed in the glass, its mouth working independently of mine. My stomach lurched as I stepped closer, watching in horror. And then I heard it, inside my head, clear as if it had spoken aloud. We're already inside. The reflection grinned, splitting its face into that impossible, jagged smile. The glass spiderwebbed with cracks. The window shattered with a sound like a gunshot. Shards rained onto the floor, glittering in the lamplight. I stumbled back, shielding my face with my arm, my heart hammering in my chest. When I lowered my arm, the reflection was gone. Just broken glass, scattered across the floor like sharp, frozen tears. But the words still echoed in my skull. We're already inside. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I blinked, I saw faces staring at me in the darkness. Faces I knew, faces I didn't. The house groaned and breathed like a living thing, and I swore I felt movement in the walls, just out of sight. By morning, I was wrecked. My eyes ached, my hands shook, and the air in the house felt heavier than ever. I couldn't stay another night. I needed answers. So I drove. I didn't even think about where at first. My body just moved, as if pulled by something. But eventually, I found myself outside a small, leaning house at the edge of town. Evelyn's house. She looked older than I remembered, her thin frame wrapped in a heavy cardigan despite the warm day. Her piercing blue eyes fixed on me the second she opened the door, and I knew before I spoke that she understood why I'd come. You opened it, she said flatly. Not a question. My throat tightened. It wasn't locked anymore. She cut me off with a sharp shake of her head. It's never locked. Not really. It only waits. Her words made my stomach twist. I followed her inside, the air thick with the smell of dust and old wood. The house was cluttered but cozy, nothing like the oppressive weight of mine. We sat at her kitchen table, mugs of untouched tea between us. She stared down at her trembling hands as she spoke. That door has always been there. Not just for me. For everyone who's lived in that house. It shows itself when it chooses. Sometimes it waits years. Sometimes it comes the first week. I swallowed hard. So you've seen it too. Her eyes flicked up to mine, sharp and weary. I lived with it for 40 years. My chest tightened. What's behind it? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's a hunger. A place where things don't die, they only change. It wears faces. It speaks in voices you love. It will say anything to make you open the way wider. I shivered, remembering the way it had spoken as my mother, my father. But what is it? She shook her head slowly. I don't think it has a name. Not one we'd understand. All I know is that it's not meant to be here. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I forced myself to ask the question clawing at the back of my mind. The boy, Daniel, was he real? Her expression flickered. Pain, guilt, fear. She looked away, her voice barely audible. He was my neighbor's son. He used to play near the creek. One day he disappeared. And that night, I heard his voice at the door. My stomach sank. Did you? She cut me off again, her eyes wet and shining. I didn't open it. But someone did. And what came out wasn't Daniel anymore. The kitchen seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice fierce despite its tremor. Listen to me. It won't stop now. Not until it has you. The more you hear it, the more it knows you. The more it is you. My breath hitched. So what do? Her eyes softened, filled with something like pity. You can't fight it. You can only leave. Leave. The word echoed in my head as I drove back to the house. Leave everything I'd built here, everything I owned, and never look back. But when I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. Because the basement door was standing wide open, and muddy footprints led up the stairs. I froze in the doorway, staring at the muddy footprints trailing across the kitchen floor. They were small, barefoot, too small to be mine. My throat went dry. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, get in my car, and never look back. But some sick part of me needed to know, needed to see. I gripped the crowbar tighter and stepped inside. The air was colder, heavy with that same earthy, metallic scent that drifted from the corridor. The house felt wrong, off balance, like its walls were bending inward. The footprints led across the linoleum, up the hallway, and straight toward my bedroom. Each step I took felt heavier than the last. The boards creaked under my weight, the sound too loud in the suffocating silence. My heart pounded against my ribs, my breath shallow. At the end of the hall, my bedroom door stood open. The footprints disappeared inside. I raised the crowbar, my hands slick with sweat, and pushed the door open the rest of the way. The room was dark despite the afternoon light outside, shadows pooling in the corners like liquid. My sheets were torn halfway off the bed, dragged toward the closet. The air was freezing. And then I saw him. Daniel. He sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the closet, his pale skin almost glowing in the gloom. His head was bowed, his dirty hair hanging in his face. He looked still, too still, like a doll someone had forgotten. My voice cracked as I whispered, Daniel? His head snapped up. Those hollow eyes locked on mine, and his mouth twisted into that jagged, unnatural grin. You let me in, he said, his voice a child's and not a child's, layered with something deep and ancient. Now I can stay. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over the rug. Get out, I rasped, though it came out weak, pathetic. Daniel tilted his head, that awful smile widening. But you want me here, don't you? The shadows in the room thickened, stretching across the floor, slithering up the walls. Faces flickered in the dark, faces of people I knew, people I didn't, all mouthing silent words. I swung the crowbar at him, the metal slicing through empty air. He flickered, vanishing, only to reappear closer, right at my feet, his hollow eyes staring up at me. Don't fight, he whispered. It only makes them louder. The whispers swelled instantly, flooding my ears, pressing into my skull. My mother's voice, my father's, friends long gone, all of them calling my name, begging, pleading, accusing. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, the crowbar clattering to the floor. My vision swam, spots of black clouding my sight. Through it all, Daniel leaned closer, his cold breath brushing my cheek. They know you now. They'll never let you go. Something snapped in me then. A surge of pure terror, pure rage. I shoved him back with all the strength I had. My hands hit something solid, cold and slick, like wet stone, but he stumbled, his smile faltering for just a second. I scrambled for the crowbar, gripping it like a lifeline, and swung again. This time, when the metal connected, it struck with a sickening crunch. Daniel screamed. Not a boy's scream. Not even human. A shriek that rattled the windows, that made the walls groan. The shadows writhed violently, faces twisting in agony. And then, in a blink, he was gone. The room was empty. Silent. I collapsed against the bed, gasping, my chest on fire. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the crowbar. But I knew. He wasn't gone. Not really. The house vibrated faintly beneath me, as if something deep within its bones was stirring. The silence wasn't peace, it was waiting. And in the broken glass of my dresser mirror, I saw a movement. My reflection smiled at me. I staggered toward the mirror, my chest tight, sweat dripping into my eyes. My reflection grinned back at me, wide and jagged, its teeth too sharp, its eyes too dark. I raised the crowbar, my hands trembling. Get out, I whispered, my voice breaking. The reflection tilted its head, matching my movement, but wrong. Delayed, as though it wasn't copying me, but deciding what I would do. Its mouth moved soundlessly at first. Then the words rang in my head like thunder. You already let us in. You can't shut us out. I swung the crowbar, shattering the mirror. Glass rained down, scattering across the floor in glittering shards. But in every shard, in every broken piece, the reflection remained. Dozens of me, smiling, whispering. The sound rose like wind through trees, a chorus of voices, all my own. My name over and over, my voice twisted, layered, distorted. I stumbled back, my foot slicing open on a shard of glass. Pain jolted up my leg, grounding me, but the whispers didn't fade. They were inside me now, filling every corner of my mind. I ran. Through the hallway, down the stairs, into the kitchen. I didn't stop until I was outside, gulping the damp night air, clutching the crowbar like it could tether me to reality. The house loomed behind me, dark and silent, but I could feel it watching. The whispers buzzed faintly in my skull. Not gone, never gone. I should have left then, driven away, burned the place down if I had to. But I didn't. Something pulled me back, an invisible thread winding around my chest, dragging me toward the basement door. I knew, without a doubt, that it was open again. I forced myself inside, each step heavier than the last, until I stood at the top of the basement stairs. The air was freezing, spilling up from below like breath from a deep pit. I descended, crowbar slick in my hand, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The door hung wide. The corridor gaped like an open wound, darker than night, the air thick with that metallic, rotting scent. My stomach churned. I should have turned back, but I stepped inside. The dirt floor crunched under my feet, each sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. My breath fogged in the narrow beam of light. The walls seemed closer than before, as if the corridor itself was shrinking around me. And then I heard it. Not whispers this time. Singing. A soft, trembling lullaby, the kind a mother might hum to her child. The notes drifted through the darkness, low and sweet, and my knees nearly buckled at the sound. Because it was my mother's voice. My throat closed. My vision blurred with tears I hadn't realized were coming. Mom. My voice cracked, pathetic in the silence. The singing stopped. Yes, she answered, her voice warm and familiar. It's me. I've been waiting for you. I stumbled forward, desperate, foolish, clinging to the sound of her. How? You're not gone, she interrupted gently. Just here, just beyond. All you have to do is come closer. The light flickered. Ahead, a figure emerged from the shadows. Small, familiar, a woman's shape, blurred at the edges, arms outstretched. I sobbed, taking another step, crowbar slipping from my grasp. Mom. Her voice softened, coaxing. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Just come to me. My foot lifted, ready to take that final step. And then the flashlight beam caught her face. Not my mother. Not human. Her skin was gray and stretched, her mouth splitting too wide as her eyes gaped black and endless. The outstretched arms twisted into claws, the lullaby unraveling into a guttural growl. I screamed and stumbled back, snatching up the crowbar, the flashlight beam shaking wildly. The thing smiled, impossibly wide, and whispered in a dozen voices at once. You already belong to us. The walls groaned, the floor shuddered, and the corridor stretched deeper, darker, endless. And behind me, footsteps. I spun around, the flashlight jerking wildly, its beam bouncing off damp stone. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and they were behind me now, though the corridor stretched only forward. The sound of them echoed unnaturally, like they were coming from everywhere at once. Who's there? My voice cracked, echoing down the narrow passage. No answer. Just another step. And another. I swung the flashlight back down the corridor, the crowbar raised, my pulse roaring in my ears. For a split second, I saw him again, Daniel. His small figure stood only a few feet away, his head bowed, hair hanging in his face. The flashlight beam hit him, and he looked up slowly. His eyes were hollow, black pits. His mouth stretched into that jagged, unnatural grin. You can't go back, he whispered. Not anymore. The walls groaned, pressing inward, the corridor trembling as if alive. Dust rained down from above. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting cold stone. The boy took a step closer. The ground beneath him rippled like water, shadows spilling outward, crawling toward my feet. I swung the crowbar, the metal whooshing through empty air. Daniel flickered, vanishing, only to reappear further down the corridor, closer to the open doorway that led back to the basement. He was between me and escape. The air thickened, heavy and choking. My lungs burned with each shallow breath. The whispers returned, louder than ever, overlapping voices spilling from every direction. My name. Please. Promises. Threats. The flashlight flickered violently, plunging me into moments of pitch black. In those flickers, I saw them. Faces pressing against the walls, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, mouths moving, eyes rolling, all whispering in unison. My knees buckled. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Daniel tilted his head, his voice rising above the rest. All you have to do is stop fighting. The corridor shook harder, the dirt floor cracking beneath me. My flashlight sputtered, went dark, then flared back to life just as the ground split open. A hand shot up from the dirt. Gray, long-fingered, claws curling. It grabbed my ankle, ice cold, and yanked. I screamed, thrashing, slamming the crowbar down. The metal connected with a sickening crunch. The hand recoiled, dragging back into the earth. But more hands followed. Dozens of them, clawing up from the dirt, reaching, grasping. I swung wildly, striking, breaking, but they kept coming, fingers brushing against my legs, my arms, my chest. The voices grew deafening, pounding in my skull. And then the corridor collapsed. The walls buckled, the ceiling cracked, and suddenly I was falling, tumbling into darkness. My flashlight spun out of my hand, vanishing. My scream was swallowed by the void. When I landed, the impact knocked the breath from my lungs. Dirt and stones scraped against my skin, the air filled with the stench of rot and iron. I groaned, forcing myself up on trembling arms. My crowbar was gone. My flashlight gone. The darkness was absolute. But the whispers were still there. Closer now, surrounding me. I staggered to my feet, arms outstretched, groping blindly. My heart thundered in my chest. Every breath was shallow, every sound magnified. And then, ahead of me, a glow. Faint at first, pale, flickering like candlelight. I stumbled toward it, drawn by equal parts terror and desperation. As I neared, the glow sharpened, revealing a small room carved into the earth. Its walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves sat objects, old toys, cracked photographs, rusted trinkets, all caked in dust, relics of lives long gone. And in the center of the room, a circle of stones. Within it, a faint, writhing light. The whispers fell silent all at once. The sudden stillness pressed against me, deafening in its weight. And from the circle, a voice rose. Calm, steady, too human. You should not have come here. The voice came from the circle of stones, quiet but commanding. My stomach clenched, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn and run, but my feet stayed planted. The writhing light pulsed within the circle like something alive, twisting, folding in on itself. I took a step closer despite myself, my breath shallow, heart hammering. Who are you? My voice cracked, small against the crushing silence. The light flared, and for a moment it took form, shifting into faces, dozens of them, flickering one after the other. Men, women, children, all hollow-eyed, all grimacing in pain, all trapped. You know us, the voice said, layered, overlapping, male and female, young and old. We are what was left behind. My hands shook violently. Left behind by what? The faces blurred, stretched, becoming something monstrous. Eyes too wide, mouths gaping. The voice dropped, guttural, echoing off the stone. By the thing that feeds. The floor vibrated beneath me. Dust fell from the ceiling. The shelves rattled, trinkets and toys clattering to the dirt. My chest tightened as realization dawned. You're not Daniel. The light twisted, the faces contorting into that jagged smile I'd come to dread. Daniel was the door, just like you. My knees buckled. I stumbled back, my shoulders slamming against the wall. The whispers surged again, pressing into my skull, louder than thought, louder than breath. Let us out. Hands shot from the circle, clawing at the air, reaching for me. Gray, skeletal, endless. The ground split wider, the glow spilling out like molten light. I turned and ran. Blind in the dark, I clawed at the walls, scraping my arms raw as I stumbled through narrow passages, the whispers chasing me like a storm. The earth shook, the ceiling cracked, shadows writhed at the corners of my vision. I don't remember how long I ran. Minutes, hours, time twisted down there. But suddenly, light. I burst out of the corridor into the basement, gasping, my body soaked in sweat and dirt. The basement door stood wide, the kitchen lights spilling down the stairs like salvation. I bolted up, slammed the door, wedged the chair beneath it. My chest heaved, my ears ringing with the echoes of those voices. Silence followed. For the first time in what felt like days, there was silence. I collapsed against the door, shaking, sobbing, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. The house was still. The air was warm again. It was over. At least, that's what I told myself. But as I sit here now, writing this, days later, I know better. The basement door is closed, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear the faintest sound. A knock. Always 3 times. And last night, when I looked in the bathroom mirror, my reflection smiled at me again. Not wide, not jagged, just a small, knowing smile. Like it's waiting. And I can't help but wonder. When the knocking comes again, will I answer?